Hello to everyone. My name is Vladyslav Shapoval. I'm from the Universidad of Almería, and today I would like to talk about such topic as Reconstructing Italianita through queer migrant identity lenses in Gia Amman's The Immigrant and Italian America book. And also I would like to say a lot of thanks to the organizing committee for accepting my proposal and giving me this wonderful opportunity to be a part of this wonderful congress. Thank you a lot. So let's get started. First, I would like to talk about the introduction, right? I'll give a brief introduction, then I will move to the second point when I would like to explain briefly how the construction of Italianita happened, the births, and then we'll see through different lenses, including queer migrant identity. Then we'll see how the Italianita, or being Italian, began to be reconstructed, right? And especially we're gonna see it in the book through those lenses on specific topics such as gender and sexuality. And then I'll give a small conclusion and show my references. So let's get started. And I would like to begin with an introduction. So the concept of Italian identity has always been a place for negotiation since Italy was unified through the time that it has been shaped by different players that made her more conservative and traditional, leaving little room for those who didn't follow the mainstream idea of what it meant, what it means right now to be an Italian. Marginalized groups not having been able to fulfill themselves, right, will and not decided to immigrate, and actually it helped them. Migration became a site where the new negotiation of Italian identity took place and shifted into new realm of possibilities under the influence and under that influence and self-understanding in a different cultural environment, right? And it could be possibly and notably tracked in the book, The Immigrant and Italian America, written by Gia Amman, okay? She is an immigrant herself. She was born in Milan and immigrated to the United States, and using her main character's eyes, Lida's eyes, she shows how Italian identity abroad could be a site of negotiation for a new version of Italianita, right? Especially as she shows that moment where a new force took place, right, in the beginning of 2000s. Bear in mind that the upbringing of the main character and the author herself took place in 80s, 90s, right? And how it becomes more flexible, yeah, let's say less traditional. And those observations possible through Lida's reflection and reminiscence that were caused by orientation and disorientation, again accepting new in-between reality, nomadism, and queer radical approach to question the existing norms that helped her otherness, right, to be found in a place in newly formed Italian identity. So she found her identity in the new site. So what I'm trying to do here is to establish the connection between how the new negotiation in exile diaspora appear and how they lead, yeah, to further inclusion into the identity, the otherness, right? Something that was not part or to be believed of being Italian. For the studied notion of what it means to be an Italian woman, right? Gender especially and sexuality will be discussed and scrutinized through using, yeah, applying the book. In order to be able to analyze the text, first of all, it's necessary to establish and understand where, yeah, Italian identity comes from and how it was constructed. So I'm gonna give you a brief idea of that. So the birth of Italianita. So the famous phrase, right, Italia is made, now we have to make Italians, right, was said by Massimo D'Agilo, a politician, right, after the unification in 1817, that tell us that the newly created state, politician of the newly created state faced a new problem, yeah, how to unite a newly created country, right, under one common identity of being an Italian. The main obstacle was, according to Bankovich, the lack of a historical tradition and the basis on which to build the assets of the state, right? As before, they were not state, right? So a common statehood. So it was a problem how to unite different regions, yeah, under common one. As also there were, according to Bankovich, no common values, no culture, no history, basically a new phenomenon, right? Another obstacle that was there is a high level of literacy among the population, no common language, right? So at that moment, there were a lot of people who also speaking French, right? And according to Bankovich, considering so-called high society, especially for royal families. The solid attempt to consolidate Italians happened during the rise of fascism in Italy. Mussolini using different historical facts, including that believing that Italians were the inheritor of Romans, so they should be as powerful as great, so they needed to develop their own empire. So Mussolini tried to spread the influence of Italian abroad and even joined the Second World War II. However, soldiers, they lacked any commitment to the new warfare, as they didn't see it as their own, so they didn't understand why they had to fight. And as a result, in 1946, after the fall of the Mussolini's regime, the war ended, and Italian won against the monarchy in a referendum installing a republic. Three parties dominated: Christian Democracy, Italian Communist Party, and Italian Socialist Party. And actually, they were very influential until the late of 1980s. Right. However, it created some problem because those parties they were inefficient. They had to create alliances with different multiple players, right? That actually led to so-called two-party system, and the Italians didn't see any political alternatives for long-lasting government period with the discourses of those parties, and only actually deepened the national crisis of identity as they didn't address the regional disparities, right? So it made citizens alienated from the state. And as a result, it all led to the 90s, where the politics of inclusion happened, right? At that moment, the separatist movement of Lega Nord appeared, right? And also at the time, the newly created political party, Forza Italia, led by Silvio Berlusconi, also took its stage, that was reaffirming to desire to preserve this constructed identity while situating in opposition to other possible Italy's that might emerge out of the chaos of the contemporary melting pot. Is to say Italians were existing in questionable or not desirable, according to Firm, right? So people who are trying to show or be themselves that would not be considered traditional, according to party members or the traditional idea of Italianita, right? They were excluded, right? So Lega Nord, the separatism, also sought to preserve the national identity that was emphasizing on the desire to form a compact from the north against the threatening coercive power of the other by the Southerners and the new foreign immigrants, because at that moment the high immigration happened. Nevertheless, the other Italian marginalized group based on gender, sexual orientation, etc., crave to be included into the notion of national identities. The direct backlashes toward them gave no significant gain, right? And as a result, it led the other, right, to immigrate, right, because they didn't want to be in this conservative environment. And abroad, they were actually able to confront their otherness, right, and to be able to reconstruct themselves and construct the new identity of being an Italian. Now, we're going to see how it was possible through queer migrant identity lenses, right? So, first of all, it was possible because they started to accept their nomadic experience, right? Also because of identity as a production, right? Something that is livable. Performative construction, disorientation and orientation between spaces, and queer radical questioning. So, let's go quickly here. Oops. Okay, here. So, let's begin with nomadic identity. Right, for each move into a foreign country, right, begins as an experience of exile that eventually leads to a nomadic acceptance of less permanent and shifted identity construct that resists essential characteristics in favor of particularistic temporary moment of identification with others who, like them, are forced immigrants of dominant culture standards, according to Firm, right, which gives us the idea that the birth of new identity commences with the acceptance of a new cultural domain, of nomadism, and an opportunity to see this identity is less rigid and more flexible. It changes the idea of traditional notion of identity. They often rely on essential views. So that's how it started, right? But then, according to Hall, identity is a production, right, which is never complete, always in process, always constituted within, not outside representation, right? So Italian identity is never complete, right? And he even goes further, saying that it belongs to the future as much to the past. It's not something that already exists, transcending place, time, history, and culture. Cultural identity comes from somewhere, have histories, right? So individuals who are preferring all the new practices to generate the new value of the identity. The identities are culturally and socially constructed. That also echoes with the idea of performative construction by Butler, that bodies often appears to be passive medium that signified by inscription from a cultural source figure external to that body. Nevertheless, we can see that through the repetition, the body becomes not a passive medium being inscribed upon, but a practice way of creating general new value that transforms the notion of identity, right, as even global, what it means to be Italian, by incorporating that. And in migration, what happened, according to Ahmed, is the process of disorientation orientation. The bodies move away as well as arrive at the re-inhabit spaces that are not exterior to bodies. The spaces are like a second skin that unfolds and folds of the body, right? So we can see that in the new environment, when a person disorients, right, the old notion of who they are not anymore supported in the new cultural environment, and the last one start bombarding them, who finds a new way to orient back to their body, a new beginning that's fine, a new way to be a person in the place of the study, being an Italian. Then in between spaces, something that goes in immigrants' identities, right, in immigration site, when we think that the new identity is born, the other identity could be actually classified as a broader standard of queer, right? So in those in between spaces, the subjects, they start to process, right, the moments where the new articulation happens, yeah, cultural. And this leads to the queer radical articulation that, according to Smith, is queer in general articulates radical questioning of social cultural norms, notion of gender, reproductive sexuality, and the family. So it questions everything that exists, especially that was relevant to Italian identity, and it was questioned for a long time by the others, right, when they immigrated, like if they did not belong to that identity that was given to them, they wanted to go further. So this lens will help us to see how the main character Lida in the book was able to reconstruct it, right? How she was able to disorient it, then orient again in the space, yeah, and obtain the new meaning and regain the identity shifts. So let's begin. First, I'd like to talk briefly about the author herself, right? As I mentioned, she was born in Italy, and then she immigrated to the US, where she worked on her PhD in molecular ontology and even published in prestigious journals such as Nature. And this actually resembles a lot with the main character, okay? As Lida also moves abroad for internship, right? So we can see how the author herself struggled to negotiate her own identity being an Italian abroad. So I think it's a kind of semi-autobiographical inclusion that can help us to see how the reality blends in the fiction and provides new meanings as well. So first of all, I would like to talk about being Italian, Italianità, and gender, right? So according to the main characters, Lida's constant reflection, right? It's possible to locate a pattern that leads one to believe that the main challenge that her troubled was a gender role. And she starts from simple one. For example, being a woman in Italian society, right? She recognizes that mostly women are left very little jobs. The jobs of power, as she called, are usually for men, right? And for women, they were not that common. And even she says in her book, I wanted to be a fireman myself, which had caused a bit of concern to my family. Mama had begged me to abandon the idea lest she died of worry. Eventually, I settled for genetic engineering, finding out when our nuns I would come abroad for a year. You had fallen chair, the smell, and had blurred. You should have been a fireman, right? So even the family, her mother was against something being powerful, being constructing her future. Then she see that along with gender roles, it performs that some of them were also coming from Christian, Catholicism, specifically narratives that impose conservative cultural traditions. And for example, in this piece, we can see that she's talking with her friend Flora, right, who's her roommate, and she says to Flora, because I'm Catholic, there is no fooling around for good girls. Oh, but Lulian and lasting is okay. I cross my arms. Most of my friends were Catholic, including Alexei, but the extent to which they follow the religion mandates, subscribe subjective. Flora claims, yes, look but don't touch, right? So they followed the religion, however, they still allowed themselves to be a bit out of place. Yeah, that is not actually Catholic itself. Also about the marriage, Lida argues Flora not to marry just because she has to, but she got backlash from her saying, look at you, yeah, you can't wait because marriage means nothing to you. I'm 28 and I'm running options, meaning that marriage would be the only option for her, right, for Flora to be happy or to follow that order of Catholicism that she learned from. And also about toxic relationship, right? She was with a boyfriend. Unfortunately, it was not a stable relationship, that there was some violence as well. So here, she could see that men, according to her, were very jealous of power, and they were even intimidated, emasculated by the women's strengths. Because if we didn't need them to feed and protect us, what good they were? What good were they, right? Amman says in a book through Lida's replics. So then what would they be? Now let's talk about the sexuality. So reflection is also possible to know some difference between what affection is approved of, right? So Italians made out everywhere, in subway, in church steps, in parks, but public displays of affection were commonly limited at kissing and some occasional rubbing. Here I would never see anyone kissing and told people held hands occasionally, but somehow public masturbation was socially acceptable. So they see how what meant, right, to show affection in Italy and the United States somehow different, right? It's the contrary. Shaped by Catholicism, public affection is more common than in the US. However, Lida later learns about the different possibilities of sexuality. How little did she know about other ways of loving and that existed at her disposal in Italian culture. So it brings her back to the idea of a sexuality that she learned from her friend Omar, Yeah, my stare in my eyes. No, sex means nothing to me. I was bewildered. So much for all that Amar gossip Stacy had fed me through Amar being a sexually quite feed with him kissing my navel on that drunken Friday night concert. How he would follow me and had meant nothing to him. That was like little sister to him. So she's shocked, right? She doesn't understand how a person can be asexual and what it means, but she's learning little by little. However, when she returns back to Italy for the stepbrother's wedding, Lida was able to assimilate and negotiate what happened with Shantesh. And she realizes that she was different, right? And it changed her idea what meant to be different as a woman and also sexually, right? So here she tries to ask a friend for a piece of advice because she doesn't know what to do with Amar because he's after her and she kind of likes him, but he's asexual. So what's the idea behind? But that's what Lexi, her friend, says. Did you kiss, touch, share a bed? You mean no penis and vagina? Then I guess Elena and I just friends as well. I was speechless. Lexi and Lana had been dating for a year. Was it possible Amar had been outraged because I would call him a friend after we spent a night making out, and then I thought he was dismissing our friendship, but in fact I've been denying at the moment. No way. Lexi tilted her head, amused in my shock. I swallowed Lexi. I'm an idiot. Not only she confronted the difference in sexual and romantic relationships, but she also opened the queer possibility for her by giving an example of herself. Being a lesbian in a relationship with another woman opened new ways for Lida, right, to see what sexuality is from the perspective of Lexi. Lida was able to queer and first incorporate the new identity, hence the new identity she received as an Italian. So now I'd like to give a small conclusion. As we were able to see, Italian identity was created through years. However, it incorporated some conservative and traditional notions of what it means to be an Italian. And as a result, the otherness, right, went to appear, and specifically 90s started to question that traditional notion of being Italian. Nevertheless, there was a backlash that led to other people to unfortunately flee their own country. Yet, for good or for bad, they found their way to negotiate and shape the Italian identity, right? As we were able to see, identity is a product, right, that is constantly happens, and thanks to that acceptance, right, of new cultural domain of nomadism that they were living in, it gave them opportunity to see her identity less rigid, more flexible, and translates in the category and start possible link between self-identification, right, and marginalized identity they were establishing. And after all, in immigration, disorientation happens that lead to new orientation of the new identity, and the space in between the new formation took place with cultural differences. And finally, the queer notion assisted the question of the existing norm and social tradition that radically changed one perspective. In the book, it was possible to see the negotiations through the eyes of the main character, lead especially her idea of what it meant to be an Italian woman and to have the sexuality, right? Define Catholic norms of importance of marriage and assign non-important roles for women, with men patriarchal idea of dynamic in the relationship, as well as seeing her own sexual experience and others. Lida was able to negotiate her new Italianita that is sexually and generally flexible and empowering for her. And that gave a possibility for others to see that too. Now I'd like to show my references. I hope you like my presentation. I'd like to say thank you, and I hope you have a wonderful day, and I hope you have a wonderful conference ahead of you.